Welcome to the Project Vanguard podcast, home of the community of veterans in energy, where we explore the journeys of veterans leading in energy. We're building American energy dominance through an all-the-above approach, where energy security is national security. And we're working to double the amount of veterans joining the clean energy workforce. I'm your host, Kevin Doffing. Today's guest is Rob Anders, an Army infantry officer turned clean energy executive who now leads project development at EDP Renewables. Rob's journey started with 2 deployments to Iraq and Afghanistan and continues today in a new fight, putting American power on the grid and standing up the next generation of military leadership. Rob didn't take the straight path, though. After active duty, he earned his master's in energy policy from Georgetown, worked inside the Department of Energy, and helped shape renewable strategy at the national level. He's now building long-term infrastructure projects across the country and teaching military leaders that are still in the fight. In this episode, we talk about why development is the tip of the spear, how local permitting battles tie directly into national security, and why AI and data centers are creating a once-in-a-generation demand spike that only clean energy can meet. We also cover Rob's current role teaching at the U.S. Army War College, the importance of earning trust in local communities, and how the values of military service translate into real-world energy leadership. If you're a veteran looking for your next mission, or a project developer wondering what military service has to do with project siting, this episode will hit home. Let's get into it. Rob, thank you so much for making the time to talk today. I know you're a busy guy.
You're quite welcome. Quite welcome. Yeah, it's a real honor to be here.
Where are you at today?
I'm working remotely in my home in the Woodlands, Texas, and I work for EDP Renewables, and our North American headquarters is right in downtown Houston.
We had to reschedule Landon. We were trying to interview him yesterday, and
No, I'm glad you're talking to Landon Redman. He's been a member of my team. He joined EDP Renewables. He's going on a year and a half now, a little more than that. He's been a great addition to the team, Army veteran himself, just a tremendous guy. Glad you're in touch with him.
And y'all are leading your employee resource group for vets internally, right?
That's right. He and I are co-chairs. I founded the group 8 years ago, and then Landon has recently joined me as co-chair as of this year.
Yeah, I met Landon because he reached out and was like, hey, I want to apply for this Veterans Advanced Energy Project. I'm like, oh, this stuff's closed. Sorry, man, maybe next year. And he was like, do you need an intern? I'm like,
Yeah.
sorry, what? He's like, do you need an intern? I'm like, we've never used one before. He's like, but I could do it, right?
Yep.
And I'm like, yeah. And just kind of like shoehorned himself in and was a great asset. Like, I love that guy.
Yeah, I think it's a real testament to his creativity, and, he's got a real developer mindset, which is, very reluctant to take no for an answer and trying to figure out a way to accomplish his intent and his interests. And he's applied that to the development world for EDPR to great effect. And obviously there's a lot of similarities with that mindset that come from military service.
Now, I always find that development is kind of one of the key entry points for a lot of veterans into the space because it's such a diversified skill set. There's not a school that has a project developer degree that you can go find. So if you run a development shop, you've got to go find some interesting personalities with different backgrounds, with different skill sets, to your point, that don't take no and get after it. And that's just one thing I've always found that, veterans are well positioned for.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. That is interesting that you mentioned there's no real clearinghouse or specific training program for development, which I think...
Is that something you're working on among the many things that you're juggling?
No, but it's just an interesting concept because in one sense that's true, but in another, we hire people with renewable energy degrees. Now, you can major in wind energy kind of thing, which is great. And certainly the other technical dimensions of the industry are out there and growing and available, which is cool to see. But to your point about development specifically, development is at the intersection, at the crux of all of the different disciplines. And there's no real specific training program for that because it requires just a different skill set. I would put first and foremost leadership, and then sort of a close second to that is an aptitude and a willingness to learn and understand at least enough about all the different disciplines to fully appreciate and leverage how they intersect. That's really what it means to be a developer. It's very similar to being a leader in the military, where you've got a huge, diverse array of people with different skill sets. You've got
Mhm.
a very diverse organization with different structures, different functions. And to be a leader in the military, you've got to be able to know and appreciate where those resources are, what the strengths and weaknesses are of the individuals in the units, and then how to bring those resources to bear to accomplish the mission, whatever it is. It's very, very similar. I recognized those similarities right away in my early part of my tenure as a developer. It really, really reminded me of being an infantry officer.
I was about to say that. It always struck me as like tip of the spear.
Yeah.
There are people that have logistics MOS, and yet somehow I'm sometimes doing their job, for my little platoon or, what quartermaster, whatever it is, you just got to get it done.
Yeah.
And when I was trying to get in, I was working with a guy, Mike Skelly. He was making introductions to try and get me a development job when I tried to get in the industry. Of course, that was right before we found out number 3 was on the way, and maybe a
Oh boy.
heavy travel job wasn't ideal.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Well, I didn't start out as a developer coming out of the service. I just did not know what to do. I'd spent really my 20s as an infantry officer, including, 2 deployments, 27 months downrange in Iraq and Afghanistan. I was a senior captain at the time, recently married, children on the way, and did not know specifically what to do. But I did the introspection of just kept asking myself, what am I interested in? It was an exhilarating experience in, my time on active duty because there was a gigantic mission, the global war on terror. It was a worthy cause. The skills and adventures and education I got in the military was far, exceeded anything I could have ever expected, just given the conditions and the timing. And I've always had this intense sort of curiosity about all kinds of different disciplines. So it's always been a difficult thing for me to choose one particular thing to be an expert in. So I'm not a PhD kind of person that is going to zero in on one narrow slice of a academic pie. But rather, I really like the intersection of so many different disciplines. And so to me, transitioning out of the service, out of active duty, I recognize that where do all of these different disciplines intersect in industry? And broadly, it was energy. It's like, wow, you got everything overlaid in the energy industry. And then within that sort of framework, I really began to realize, well, where are the front lines? This is sort of the infantryman in me coming out saying, where are the front lines in that gigantic industry, in that big intersection of all the different disciplines with an urgent, important mission for the country? And that's kind of what gravitated me towards renewable energy. And so that's where I ended up in my transition off of active duty. I started out I went to grad school. I spent 2 years. Really, that was kind of a strategic pause for me to get sort of recalibrated. I studied energy policy at Georgetown University in Washington, and then found myself at the Department of Energy as a presidential management fellow for 2 years right after graduation. And that was great. So it's a real, I was not a political appointee, but it was quite an adventure and an education and exposure to how Washington works on the inside, between the branches of government, between the interagency and the executive branch, and then also the intersection of how the states relate to Washington and then how the industry relates to government. It was just a very dynamic and rich experience for me.
So I want to come back to your DOE and kind of like what that experience was afterwards when you started moving into
Sure.
industry. But take a step back. What's your kind of commander's perspective on where we are in this moment? Like, what's your sit rep for where you sit in your job and in the industry right now?
Oh, I think this is just a phenomenal time to be in development. I think we are at a major, major inflection point with respect to
Okay.
energy and national security. I mean, It is an astonishing time to be involved in this grand effort to put as much power on the grid as possible for our domestic consumption. And energy dominance is which you see a lot in the news these days, as a priority for the country.
Now, inflection points can either be major step function increases or decreases. Where do you see, like, we have this opportunity, but opportunities are also challenges, right? The entrepreneur sees an obstacle as an opportunity. What do you think is kind of at risk in this moment and how we address it?
Oh, that's an interesting question. Well, I think from a national security standpoint, certainly so much of the power demand is coming from AI. I think that kind of goes without saying. It's common knowledge, I would presume.
No one's going to argue with you on that. I mean, I would say the risk on that is, you know, these data centers are going to be built for a long time, but we're seeing a surge of activity. And if we don't capture the moment, if we say, okay, we only believe in nat gas and there's a 7-year backlog on new turbines, or it's going to be a 4 to 6x increase in the cost of energy, those are the only two pathways forward. We're not going to do renewables inside of this moment, right? And I think there are people that, for whatever reason, do not like renewables and don't want to see it happen. But if we miss this moment by not building out quickly enough power generation, we can miss the opportunity. The opportunity is not going to be there in 10 years, I don't think, right? Like, if we're not building AI now and powering it and reshoring, time kills all deals, as my banker friends
Yeah.
love to say. So I think that, like, one of the things at risk, aside from national security, just on the business side, is if we don't build enough power for the demand that's at our doorstep, it goes somewhere else. It goes to Europe. It goes to Abu Dhabi. It goes to Saudi Arabia. It goes somewhere else. The stuff can be built anywhere if we're not willing to build the infrastructure to support it.
Yeah, I think that's largely true. It's obviously a crystal ball kind of question about 5, 10 years out and what the demand curve is.
Right.
I've seen some projections that say, well, the power demand for AI is going to plateau, in 5, 7 years or so, but who knows? I mean, it could even just take a steeper increase, just depending on technology development. So I think, to your point, one of the key challenges that we face as developers is, the permitting landscape. And so much of what you just described, I think, has implications at state and local level, primarily the local level, where these permits have to go through city or county jurisdictions for approval. And so connecting the geostrategic national interest, national security dimension of what the overall industry is poised and ready to do, which, to your point, is, it is the fastest way to put electrons on the grid in bulk is, renewable power generation and battery storage for sure. So articulating that aspect of where the country is now in a meaningful way at the county level is extremely difficult. It's extraordinarily hard. And, in my experiences as a developer, operating across many states in the eastern part of the country and a few out west, that's all well and good. And people are, patriotic and well-intentioned. But at the end of the day, the permits and the projects rest on local economic decisions.
But go back. So I get the impact and the import of that, but, like, why is it hard, in your opinion? I have some ideas, but I'd love to hear your experience. Like, why is it hard at the county level to do these things?
A couple reasons. First and foremost, there is a speed and an urgency for all the reasons we've talked about, where the data centers are super hungry for power. They want to work with companies like EDP Renewables to supply the power for their data centers, similar with other manufacturers. But the speed and the urgency is intense. And so citing major projects like these in largely, rural communities is a significant change. It's just a big change. And so the size and scope of a proposed change, coupled with the urgency, causes a lot of concern, duly warranted concern. And so that is part of the backdrop of the permitting dialogue in local jurisdictions. The other aspect of course, is that, renewables are not alternative energy anymore. It's mainstream. Everybody's seen or had some kind of interaction with solar panels or wind turbines or battery storage. Either they know somebody who's got panels on the roof or they've driven past a turbine. I
Mhm.
mean, they're so common nowadays. There's really nobody who is completely unaware. And therefore, at every level, everyone has formed some kind of opinion about renewables. And all of those opinions, for better or for worse, are pouring into the local legislative process. So the formulation of ordinances and rules around if, how, and where these projects can be sited locally, it is just now more of an intense conversation. And so depending on the states, and likewise at the state level too, but depending on the states and local jurisdictions, we are seeing much more volatility in the permitting environment, really from county to county.
Yeah.
Some counties love it. They see the
Yeah.
value proposition. They're benefiting tremendously from these projects. And other counties are, maybe staunch against it. And we've also seen those types of counties I mentioned looking left and right and saying, oh, well, look at all the benefits to local infrastructure.
Why do
Why
they
do
have
they
new
have new
schools? Why do they
stadiums
have
and
they have a new fire
exactly? And
truck?
so all of those things take time to notice, and those are coming around.
I'll give you another one. One of our guys that was doing some groundwork in Indiana, grew up outside of like Kokomo, and he was talking about how the opposition came in from out of town. They're talking to everybody about don't sign these leases for a wind farm that was coming through. Well, they ended up building the wind farm, and some of the farmers didn't take them up on the leases. Well, fast forward 5 years, their neighbors are weathering the droughts, whereas they listened to the opposition, and now they're just out there in the wind, on their own and missing out on a really good cash crop that's drought
Yeah.
resistant.
Yep.
And they're pissed, but they're like, where's the guy that convinced me this was a bad
Sure.
idea? He's gone. Or we've seen some counties in Texas where the opposition doesn't go after the developer moves in and they build their project, but there's nobody touting the benefits of the project after it's built. They're touting the benefits to get the permit, but then we just don't see it afterwards continuing to sell. But there's still an opposition movement of, baseless facts, but there's no counter narrative.
Yeah, and it's tough. It's a tough proposition. But you're right, and the benefits are material. And I think part of the challenge is they take some time to actually materialize as it goes through the tax revenue and all of that just accumulates over time, and it's not quite as obvious.
Well, I just think back like when I was in Iraq. I mean, I think you and I were there round about the same time. I was in Ramadi in '06 and '07. And I mean, like, as an infantryman, you think, my job is to kick in doors, but like at a certain point, you got to build it up so that they can sustain without you, right? Like the first half of my deployment was very kinetic, but the back half, once we secured the area, was building things up, being a staying force, a stabilizing force, and letting that economy rebuild. And I'll tell you, like, the best thing I ever did was issuing out contracts and giving people work when I was in Iraq. That was way more impactful on securing that area than kicking in a door and finding a small cache or whatever, you know? Because once there was a strong economy, nobody wants to mess with that game. You lose all of the like fence sitters and the 90% of people that were engaged in any kind of insurgency because they're like, nah, I'm good, man. I've got a roof. My kids are getting fed. I'm busy. Things are looking up. Right. And I think in these communities, once we get in and we're making the impact, we just stop selling. And that's where the real impact is. Once those dollars are flowing through and not just showcasing this is what happened next door, but this is what's still happening today in your local community.
Yeah, I mean, it is an ongoing good news story to tell for sure.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just hard. Just like what you described it just takes a lot of time and energy and resources.
Right.
EDP Renewables is a developer, owner, operator that makes us pretty uncommon in the industry in that we own and operate our projects for the lifetime of each project, which underscores, from a development standpoint, the earnestness and sincerity of the relationships that we build with landowners and all the participants in the projects. where we operate because we fully intend to be a long-term member of the community for, upwards toward half a century. So that makes a big difference, I think, just in terms of the impression that locals have on particularly our business, but also the industry. That has a reassuring effect. The corollary in Iraq was always that question of, well, when are you going to leave? And when is your unit going to be gone? And when is
Yeah.
everything going to just collapse and that's not the case with these projects and how our company operates as a long-term contributing member of these communities.
So take me back. How did you get into the military? What was that decision-making process like?
Well, so first and foremost, my dad graduated from West Point back in class 77. He's just a tremendous guy. Always has been a huge role model for me. Just very grateful for him. And, he never put any kind of pressure on me at all to follow in his footsteps per se. But by the time I was in mid high school, I recognized I wasn't eager to specialize in any one thing. And I thought, well, where can I go to do the most different things and experience a whole bunch of different disciplines and all of that? The military, to me, I had some exposure early on. My dad was a reservist. He got out of active duty when I was 3 years old. So he was always a part-time soldier in my, working memory. And he served in the Gulf War when I was 10, 11 years old. So his example was a great one for me. But when it came time to think about what to do beyond high school, the military broadly was the opportunity for opportunities that I was eager to go explore. West Point in particular, so I applied in my junior year and really set my sights on that. I was accepted early and I did not apply anywhere else. And my mom she just kept saying, like, every week, she's like, "Rob, you're an idiot. Like, what if you bust your ankle and you physically can't go?" And I'm like, "Come on, Mom, don't worry about it."
What could possibly go wrong?
Yeah, so I really set my sights on West Point. I showed up there on my 18th birthday, and I tell people I would not do it twice, but I would do it again.
Nice. So remind me, because I think when we were talking, we were in Iraq around the same time.
That's right. Yep, I was in Hawija, which is like just south of Kirkuk,
Mm-hmm.
and yeah, I showed up there in August of 2006, and then we were extended to 15 months with the surge in '07.
Yep. So when did you decide? Because you're not out, correct, Colonel
Correct.
Anders?
Yep. So I stayed on active duty for just a little over 6 years. Joined the New York National Guard for about a year, and then I mentioned I went to grad school in Washington D.C. and moved to the District of Columbia National Guard, where I served for 14 years as a part-time National Guardsman. And then just recently, last year, a little over a year ago, I transferred to the Army Reserves and now serve as a part-time instructor at the Army War College.
What's that like? I mean, you showing up and like berating your TA because somebody did a Chat GPT essay that you recognize and all of them are the same. Like, what's it like being a teacher at the War College?
I truly enjoy it. It is, just to give you a sense, it is a senior service college, which is to say it is a requirement for field grade officers to become general officers or flag officers. And so the students in the course, every year there's about 300 students that come from all different corners of defense, primarily at the Army War College. The students are a mix of Army officers and Air Force officers, but you got a mix of other services as well. So you've got Navy, Marine Corps, and then you've got some Foreign Service officers from the Department of State. You've got all kinds of other different agencies represented, to include professional staffers from Capitol Hill and everybody in between. So each person is coming typically with 20 to 25 years of experience in national security, national defense, and the credentials and the performance and the potential of the students there is just top notch, which is really a special kind of group of people. So I support a full-time instructor, and we run a section of 15 students, and we are in the second year of a 2-year Master's in Strategic Studies program. So that's kind of the structure of what I do. But really, the purpose is really exciting to me. So if you think about the students, and again, the vast majority are lieutenant colonels and colonels. If you think about that rank, in the Navy, a colonel equivalent, an O6 is a captain, and, an O6 captain in the Navy drives an aircraft carrier. Or in the Army, a colonel is a brigade commander. In the infantry, that's, 3 to 4,000 troops in a brigade combat team structure. So if you look at those capabilities as weapon systems for the country, those are tremendous. At the schoolhouse, what we are focused on is that the individual officer themselves is the weapon system. And so as they're moving into flag officer ranks, 1-star, 2-star, 3, 4, or they're on the staff of high-ranking military leaders and strategists, they are the weapon system that is going to bring the argument and the analysis, the recommendations, and the decision-making capability into the rooms where world history is at stake and national security is at stake. So to me, that is an extremely fun and dynamic challenge. I like to write. I think that's part of why they hired me back. I was a student there, I should mention. I graduated in 2023 as a distinguished honor grad there. So they hired me back as an instructor, but a lot of it is shaping communication, written and verbal, and really honing the student's ability to make arguments, not opinions, but make arguments.
So I want to come back to you liking writing because I want to talk about your book a little bit. But how do you see the compare and contrast, these future flag officers with the C-suite that you've been exposed to in this industry? Like, what kind of similarities or lessons learned do you think they could benefit from? Or what does that look like when you have the Venn diagram? Is it a high overlap or a low overlap between, the senior executive class inside of this industry versus what you're seeing, coming through school?
Yeah, I would say maybe it's intuitive, but a very strong overlap, certainly around the leadership component. And I think the key difference is just sort of the size and scope of the decisions at stake, right? When you're in a 2, 3-star command, the decisions on the table just have different outcomes, right, than a C-suite decision. I don't want to diminish what goes on in the business world by any stretch, because that's real capital, that's livelihoods and all of that. Success or failure depends ultimately on what those decisions are and the quality of those decisions. And I think the challenge in both scenarios is largely and increasingly data driven. And that is the challenge, I think, at every level is what is the right data? What is the right analysis? And is that the compelling argument that shapes the ultimate decision? So whether that's in a C-suite or in the Pentagon, the extent to which those decisions are the best, that is the challenge. And that's an exhilarating one, just given the, again, what's at stake.
Take me back to the book. So you've written a book. I hear you're writing a second book. Why would you do that to yourself? That just sounds like self-punishment.
Well, I did write a book a long time ago, actually published it in 2013, but it was about my experience as a lieutenant in Afghanistan when the global war on terrorism was in its first couple of years. So I was a platoon leader in Paktika province, which is sort of centrally located along the eastern Afghan border with Pakistan. And it was, the wild, wild west. I think we were the second unit on the ground there. We showed up in March of 2003. I was, fairly new to my platoon and just nobody had any combat experience. I was in the 25th Infantry Division, which had not deployed since Vietnam. So it was all cutting our teeth and learning the ropes. So I just wrote. I never intended to really write a book, but I kept a lot of notes and I had a brilliant battalion commander, just an exciting leader, one of my all-time favorites. His name is Walter Pyatt, and he recently retired as a 3-star general. He was the director of the Army staff in his last role in the Pentagon. Just a tremendous American hero. But at the time, he led us in a very innovative counterinsurgency campaign. What you just described, Kevin, about contracts and building economic stability and nation building was, new at the time. You could probably appreciate that we were
Right.
in the throes and aftershocks of 9/11, and everyone was eager and committed to kinetic, violent response. But back then, Lieutenant Colonel Walt Pyatt said, no, we're going to have better outcomes if we take this tack. And so I just amassed a whole bunch of notes. And in the years following my deployments, I saw the trajectory of the wars. I saw the trajectory of the media campaigns and the books coming out about kinetic, high intensity firefights and that kind of thing. But really, that book was calibrated towards the 99% of the time when the bullets are not flying and the roads are not exploding, and how those were crucial to the outcome of the war. So
Yeah. Well, when you disrupt it before somebody gets shot,
exactly.
right? Like,
That's right.
I've tried to explain to my kids, I always wave to people, the saying is, nobody waves, everybody waves back, right? And they're like, why are you don't even know who these people are. They're cutting through our neighborhood or whatever. I'm like, listen, I can think of several times I definitely didn't get shot because I just waved at somebody and I smiled at them
Oh, yeah.
because I know that like a little convoy behind me did. Like,
I know. I get it.
I didn't change what they were going to do, but I changed what they were going to do to me.
That's right. And, I always thought that the great challenge, certainly back then, and this is the controversy with counterinsurgency broadly, is you got to walk that tightrope. So I got to be the nicest guy in the room when all of my guys around me were the baddest guys on the block, and trying to find that balance.
Yeah. One of my NCOs used to always say, is like, you haven't had as many friends die, so you can do this. I couldn't give them money the way that you're
Yeah.
having to issue out, stuff for contracts. But he's like, I respect him and I'm glad that you're doing it. It's definitely better. I just couldn't do that. And I'm like, yeah, I'm sure they feel the same way. It's,
Yeah.
we're leaving in a year, rotating back a year and a half later. They don't leave this place.
That's right. That's right. I think in the grand summary, it amounted to, renting hearts and minds because of the impermanence. So that's ultimately what that book was about, how effective counterinsurgency can be given all the best possible conditions you could hope for. And that's really what the short of the book is. And I gave some presentations and some talks in and around Washington, D.C. and up at West Point about the book, and, sold a few copies, nothing too big of a deal, but it was very, very, very helpful for me to just digest, distill, and take all the things out of my head and my memory and put it into a book form so that it's on the shelf and I don't have to carry it around at all. It's on the shelf. So I didn't realize how therapeutic of a process that was.
And are you working on something new now?
I am. So my studies at the War College just catalyzed a lot of thinking about the studies, dive deep into military theory, a lot of the deep observers and historians about military history. All of that study has sort of catalyzed a synthesis of human nature as it relates to sort of individual nature and God's nature. So the book I've been working on it's really about sort of practical philosophy, I think is a way to sort of sum it up.
Well, as we're talking about practical philosophy and we're starting to wrap up, what is your practical philosophy advice for veterans, transitioning service members that are looking at this industry? What would be your advice to them?
Yeah, just a couple of key points. The renewable energy industry specifically is a very similar ecosystem to what you've likely experienced in the military, which is to say, there's a big, huge, worthy goal, a worthy mission to go get that has profound implications for the lives of Americans and national security and the future of the country. And so that's really cool. It's a cool place to be, and it really resonates. And maybe that goes without saying, but the industry, just like the military, has all the different disciplines and dimensions that are necessary to make it work. So economics, technical, policy and politics, environmental issues, engineering challenges, you name it. It's all intersected in the industry, which is great. So if you are a specialized person coming out of the service with a particular passion for a certain discipline, there is ample room and opportunity in the renewables industry to participate and contribute. Likewise, I think a lot of folks are coming out of the service, and maybe this resonates with folks with my particular experience, which was I was taking orders for, my early professional career. Go here, do that thing. And, coming out of the service is hard because no one's going to give you orders. You got to choose your own adventure. You got to chart your own path. And so my disposition was, what is going to be the place that I can get to with the opportunity for the most opportunities? And the way I sort of think about it is, if I'm traveling along a roadway and unsure about the long road ahead, I want to find a roundabout that has the most intersecting roadways so that I can be in that roundabout and observe the different off-ramps and make an assessment before going to the next node or roundabout. For me, that was grad school, was the first roundabout. The next one after that was the U.S. Department of Energy. And then the next one has been working in industry as a roundabout to say, hey, look, what do I like? What don't I like? And where do I go from here? There's got to be a theme of connectivity as you're traveling from one node to the next. For me, it was leadership, really focusing on being a good leader of teams, being a good team member, a good follower. That has been a common thread to get from one of these roundabouts to the next. But doing a lot of introspection and knowing what you like and don't like is the grand challenge, and the extent to which any service member coming out of active duty, the harder you take a look at that and keep working on the answer to that question, the more clear the next steps will be. I'll just finish with a piece of advice that a 2-star general gave me when I was coming off of active duty. He was the former commander of the 25th Infantry Division. And I was asking him about this, like, I don't really know what to do next, sir. And he said, listen, you've got all kinds of resources, people in industry and across the country who are willing to bend over backwards to help you, but you got to know what to tell them. And that was a really encouraging and dismaying thing for him to say, because on the one hand, it was like, wow, okay, I get the first part, but I don't have a clue about the second.
It's also smart for somebody who hasn't done it yet to
Yeah.
he must have been talking to a lot of people. Well, and that's one of the reasons we started Project Vanguard, right? We want people to be able to get that. And so, when people join, they're able to go on the Slack channel and just meet people that have already done
Yeah.
this and are already in the industry,
Sure.
so that you can ask the question without feeling like a fool, because it's such a culture shock to leave the, socialist commune that is active duty military service, and then welcome to capitalism where you could do anything or nothing and nobody cares.
Yeah, sink or swim.
Nobody's worried about your promotion. Nobody's worried about, is your barracks clean? Have you gone to the doctor lately? Nobody is checking on any of that for you.
Well, the last thing I would recommend to folks coming out of the service is, my own personal experience was I was sure I was coming off of active duty. Again, just got married, new, baby's on the way. And that was in 2008, and the economy was heading over a cliff. And I thought, well, maybe I'll just keep a toehold in the National Guard. And that experience did not go very well initially. Because again, being sort of a hard charger on active duty, I thought, well, I'm not interested in a part-time soldier kind of thing. But I met a good leader, and he said, Rob, just give it a chance. Stay in. It matters who stays in. It matters. And I took his advice. I was a senior captain, not focused on military at all. But goodness, I am so grateful to that leader. And he retired as a 1-star general himself. He is one of my all-time heroes. His name is Brigadier General retired Ken Ryan. And what tremendous advice, because the network that I gained in my National Guard service as a part-time soldier, the leadership experience, the different exposure to a different aspect of service was truly impactful and a catalyst for my career in energy. And there's a push and a pull and a positive result in both camps because of his advice and staying in. So I would strongly encourage folks coming off of active duty to consider the National Guard or the reserve components. There is a wilderness of opportunity to continue to serve in uniform. And that's good for the individual, it's good for the country, and it's good for the industry.
Rob, that's great advice, man. Listen, I appreciate you making the time today. I love the work that you're doing. I love the support you've given us at Project Vanguard on helping us grow. And I can't wait to see where this industry goes, and glad that you're here to, take such an active and leadership role inside of it.
Well, Kevin, thanks for the opportunity here. It's a pleasure to talk to you as always. I appreciate what you and your team are doing. It really, really makes a difference.
Awesome. Thanks, Rob.
Thanks again.
Thanks for tuning in to the Project Vanguard podcast. If this episode sparked something for you, share it with someone who's ready to think differently, whether it's about an all-the-above energy approach, how energy security is national security, or the veteran workforce in our industry. If you believe what we're building, a quick review goes a long way. You can do that wherever you get your podcasts. And until next time, keep up the fire.